Hi everyone, thank you for joining the first Christmas Challenge 2022 webinar today. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes for people to join the webinar and then we will get started. Hi everyone, we're just going to give it one more minute for a chance for people to join the webinar and then we will get underway. So thanks for joining us today. Great, I think we can get started now. I think everyone's joined. So I will first hand over to Alex.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Day. I'm Managing Director of the Big Give. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. Also on the call, we have my colleague Sahil and Bethany from the Big Give, and we're delighted to welcome Stuart from the FSI, who's going to be leading this session this afternoon. We've partnered with the FSI for a few years now in delivering our training, and you're in for a treat because the quality of the training is excellent. Whether it's your first time working with the Big Give or whether you're a sort of long-standing partner, we are just really thrilled that you applied and are taking part in the Christmas Challenge this year. One of the Big Give's values is togetherness, and we just see the immense value in bringing charities together at Christmas time to raise vital funds. And I'm sure if it's your first time taking part in the Christmas Challenge this year, hopefully you'll experience that firsthand. It's a real true example of the sum being greater than the individual parts. So we're super excited to have you taking part. There's just two things that I wanted to say to you this afternoon before I hand over to Sahil and Stuart. Is firstly, just a piece of encouragement is that the work that you do is absolutely amazing and is absolutely vital, particularly if you look outside your windows or listen to the news. The work that you are doing is absolutely critical at the moment. And I just want to encourage you that people are still giving to charity. I think there is a big concern about the economic climate and will people give, will people respond, and we have a great session on that coming up, so please do check the schedule of training. But just to encourage you, the response that we are seeing to campaigns that we are running on the Big Give at the moment and over the past few months is that people are still continuing to give, and it's just about sort of communicating your impact. So just want to offer that one encouragement. And then the one tip, we at the Big Give, and I often get asked, what's the one thing that you see in terms of a successful campaign? What makes a charity successful? People think it might be a particular cause area and that people want to really donate to children's charities, or perhaps it is the bigger charities and if you've got a big income that you do really well on the Big Give. And we don't see trends across any of those things at all. What we see is charities that really take time to prepare. And again, I think it's a great the sort of way I would summarize it is you will get out what you put into the campaign, and the more sort of preparation and planning you can do ahead of the Christmas campaign, I think the more that you will get out of it as an organization and as a sort of fundraising initiative. So I really encourage you to engage with the training that we have, engage with the resources. Sahil and Bethany are on hand to support you through this process and be with you and help you. We want to help you make this a really successful fundraising campaign. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to hand over to Sahil, and then Stuart is going to sort of focus on most of the content today. But have an amazing session, and again, just delighted to have you taking part this year.
Thank you, Alex. So if you go on to the next, so this first webinar is about planning your campaign and networking. So again, as just to echo Alex words, well done for getting so far and all of your hard work so far, and welcome to the Christmas Challenge. Just a reminder that the campaign launches at midday on Giving Tuesday, which is 29th of November this year, and closes at midday 6th of December, which is the following Tuesday. we greatly encourage you to check out your dashboard and your Christmas Challenge dashboard to access the resources, so you can find out and see the links for the following webinars. We'll be also updating the webinars resources with the recordings of putting all of our webinars on YouTube, and we'll also have available the marketing guidebooks and inspirational marketing guidebooks, which are already available in the resources section. So please do check them out if you have not already done so. Also, just a thing about the worksheet for today. I did email everyone with the worksheet today, so please, you can also find that in the webinars resources, but it should also be in the email that I sent you this morning. So please do open it up, as we will be working off that. Yeah, if we go on to the next slide, just want to reiterate how the match funding works for the Christmas Challenge. So a reminder that the match funds are going to be first matched by your pledges. So in this example, this charity has secured £3,000 of pledges, and a champion has awarded them £3,000 of champion funds. So the first £3,000 that they get in donations during the Christmas Challenge week will be matched by the pledges. And once all of the pledges have been used up, then the donations are matched by the champion funds. So I would just encourage everyone to, if you've been awarded champion funding, is to really focus on ensuring you use up those pledges first, so that you do access that champion funding. And if we go into the next slide. Yeah, so just a reminder that this session is 1.5 hours long. So we have time at the end for questions and answers. If you do have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom panel. And I've already seen some of you are using the chat function on the right-hand side to introduce yourselves and to have a chat with other people on the call today. So really encourage that. So please do introduce yourself and leave any comments in the chat box throughout the webinar. It'll be really great to see that interaction going on. As it says here, watch out for more webinars in the next couple of weeks. I forgot to also mention that the transcription service is enabled on the Zoom call. So if you do need to use it, you should have access at the bottom of the Zoom panel to turn it on. And finally, if you do want to tweet about this, please use the hashtag Christmas Challenge 2022. With that in mind, I will now hand over to Stuart to get us underway.
Great, thank you, Sahil, and it's really nice to join you all. So, well, you're in for a treat, which is at least 1.25 hours of me talking at you all. So, bless you as I go. So, what I would say is I can't see you on Zoom, obviously, with the webinar format, so use the chat function if you need something repeating, if there's a question that comes up between what I'm saying, or if I'm just simply going to quickly and you want to go back a step so you understand what context. So my main aim is to help you plan your campaign and give you some of the technical tools to help you be successful. And we'll talk through a couple of examples of people that have kind of been there, done it, what they did. Different examples, not with a right or wrong in mind, but just for cause for inspiration as we go. Just a little bit of a plug for the FSI. We're a small charity, 6 staff. We do training and support for small charities. We represent 9,000 members. Doing a lot of this type of work, just helping people navigate fundraising space, but we also do strategy work, governance and social impact. So again, you can use our Twitter handle if you wanted to comment on this or other stuff that we do. At the FSI is where you'll find us. That's my plug. That's it. Over. Okay, so in terms of this session, in terms of what we'll cover, I'll just help you navigate. Sorry, just my mouse has stopped working. There we go. Okay, so in terms of what we'll cover today, it will be 4 main areas in terms of objectives. Some of you will have seen this before in planning format in terms of being smart. So we'll just talk through what that acronym means and why that's important for your campaign. We'll spend quite a bit of time just talking through people and how we might support you in network mapping, or how you might think through the different people that are within your network, some of which will be really obvious and some of which actually might get you thinking about how to reach more people, or asking people that you know and trust to reach some of their contacts if they're not already in your network. So part of the big give success from every campaign that I've seen that's been successful is the time spent beforehand building and constructing and putting the database in place of your contacts and who you're going to speak to and how. So that people section for me is the kind of the really important bit in terms of how you're going to galvanize people for your campaign and the different tone that you'll strike with them. We'll talk a little bit then about value proposition, i.e. how you're going to articulate what your solution is to a particular social need, and therefore what your impact is in terms of helping you construct the stories which will lead to successful campaigns. And then we'll do a little bit on promotion, just in terms of building on that people stuff in terms of audience segments and different examples of how people have communicated with their audience in different ways. So firstly, just to unpick what the acronym of SMART means, it's being specific, measurable, achievable, results focused and time bound. So naturally there's time constraints within this challenge format. And I think the A is probably one of the things I'll draw you to, is in terms of be realistic about the ask, the time that you need to put into this campaign. There's a degree of upfront or sunk time into the staff that are running and creating the infrastructure to help you get that right. So just being mindful of that, so then you can look at the specific goals that you want to achieve with this, and then be really clear as an organization of how you're going to measure what success looks like. So it might be, yes, the financial goal that you're raising a certain amount of money, but also one of the underpinning factors here is the network building effect helps you reach different audience and helps you attract attention to your website in different ways. And you'll see from the examples we talk through later, which will all be shared on the PDFs with you, that each campaign sees a real uplift in terms of their website traffic and their analytics. So having some of those tools behind it might not just be the number of donations from a particular number or segment of people that are your success rate. It might not be just that you've raised, I don't know, £5,000 or £10,000, but actually it's that 1,500 new people have visited your website within a certain period of time, which has allowed you to articulate your social mission to a whole new group. So that's something just to bear in mind, as well as the financial outputs. So just in terms of what SMART objectives might mean, just in really clear, practical terms. Here's an example from Settle Support, a small charity that used the service, in terms of they had a realistic aim of raising a total of 4,000 to raise £800 donations within the batch of donations. So they had certain targets of different types of income. And as I said, they had an awareness of the social media aspect of their work, in terms of, let's see if we can increase followers or likes, whatever social media platform you use, and then get ready with case studies. Part of the joy of the big give, from my perspective, as someone who's been in the sector for a long time, is the storytelling aspect, in terms of it gives you the chance to articulate your impact to new people at a time when there's a lot of attention on the hashtags around the campaign. So your organization should be getting press releases and vox pops ready now about the people that you've impacted on, preferably with those stories in mind themselves, so you can capture what Settle did in terms of features on media platforms and press releases. So in your worksheet, just to take, I won't take a lot of your time on this, but just to pause and say, okay, well, what would your campaign objectives be? So just check in with the worksheet if you've got it to hand, if not a piece of paper or a post-it note, to say, actually, not how much am I raising, but also what's achievable within the time frame. If we've got a sense of our Twitter following, how much do we want to expand that? How many new people do we want to reach through this, given the resource that we're putting into it. So what's your overall campaign objectives? And I'll give you some examples later in this session that you can look at. So we'll just pause just for a few seconds while you have a little think. And again, feel free to use the chat function if there's particular questions, or if you want to share your goals or initial thinking of goals with the group, then you can use that there. Okay, so then just moving on to the people section of this presentation in terms of segmenting your audience. So our interest here is to help you start to map out all of the people that are connected to your organisation, who you want to approach to donate to your campaign, and also how will you segment the different audience groups to tailor approaches to them. So there'll be some people that you're not asking for money from. There'll be some people that you want to ask for their kind of black book, if you like, or reach into their contacts. So it'll be a slightly different tone with them. It might be that actually one of the first steps is getting your trustees bought into this as a profile event as well as a fundraising event, and articulating that why question in terms of, well, why are different people within your audience interested in it? So again, some of this is on your worksheet in terms of a little kind of spider web diagram. So I'll just be talking through just some of the principles, very basic, of where you've done this. So if you've done any network building stuff before, please excuse my amateur introduction to it, but I just wanted to start from the basics. So you'll be in the center as your charity and starting to map out, as I said, who your trustees are, working clockwise round, thinking about current donors. If you have them, it could be that they're higher value donors. It could be that they're lower value donors. That you be very useful if you could segment them, if you do have that data, so you can articulate asks to them differently, or you don't repeat ask for money. If you've got a regular giver, you might want them to provide a different function in terms of advocating for your work in this campaign. It might be that then you could also list, and again, there might be further segmentation around different corporate partners that you have. So FSI, we have a number of sponsors, for example, but we also have a number of people that do in-kind donations for us. We'd ask them very different questions. One would be asking the in-kind thing for staff donations or marketing time or comms, graphic design time. With our sponsors, we might want to say recognize the fact that they've already given us money, so we don't want to ask them for more, but we might want them to ask to recommend people, give them a profile of them being a supporter, so they can influence others to know about us in terms of why they were a sponsor even before a big give campaign took place. You might also have a list of lapsed donors or people that were giving to you historically that you want to go back to and re-engage with, and that might be some of the first steps you make in terms of starting to rebuild connections with people. It might be you have certain patrons or particular high profile people that you need to get in the diary of early for it, and fundamentally all of the big give campaigns that I've seen are always driven by pools of volunteers and supporters, and just making sure that there's a plan there for recognizing who they are, what role do they play in that, and maybe even sending them thank you for engagement so far and look forward to working with you on the big give. Some charities even want to get people involved in what their big give goals are from a volunteer perspective as well. Now, so if you're in the spirit of co-creation, that's probably something that you'll be working on now before the main campaign launches. So in terms of practical examples of what that might look like, this is a bit of an FSI map in terms of then you might have certain key people that are under different things, but you also might have, as it says in the corporate partners, there are a certain wish list of people that you want to get involved because you've got a longer term aim of getting in contact with them and their team from a different strategic perspective. So actually you want to use a big give campaign to get your impact recognized in your charity name on the radar of people that you might want to become the charity of the year for in a year's time, whatever, and therefore you want to start with a process of unpicking that relationship, and that always starts with them hearing about you. So it's thinking practically to say, and again this goes back to the goals, is what are the other achievements that we want to make here, and actually having 2 new corporate partners or sponsors as a result of a big give campaign could be a really useful outcome, as well as the financial reward, if you like. There might also be connections between people whereby you've got volunteers that are also that in their day jobs have corporate relationships that you want to build on, and so developing the corporate ask might be one thing you ask of a certain type of volunteer, or you're converting people that are involved as trustees in galvanizing donations or stimulating donations from certain people that they know, or getting them to pledge to support in a particular way or give a resource to help your campaign lift. So there's various different ways or interactions to do that. So I'd say this isn't goes back to Alex's point really about this is the time up front being put in that will really pay dividends for you in terms of then having a plan. What I've seen is then charities have created an Excel spreadsheet, very basic one, different tabs with different relationships on them, so they can create mailing lists for different purposes. It might be that you're lucky enough to have other mail services that you can link to in that way, but it's just thinking for them that there'll be very different tones of conversations with different people that are within your charity. So if you imagine a blank wall in your office or a virtual whiteboard, maybe more practically at the moment, in terms of, okay, well, what are we going to do then in terms of recognizing the groups? That's the initial yellow post-it notes there, and then also putting some names to them in terms of, okay, there's this community group, they happen to be the Rotary Club, or actually they happen to be connected to this person who's on our trustee board, or actually this person via that other person actually knows somebody at a local law firm that could lead to some other corporate links, as we mentioned before. So the different coloured post-it notes are a little nudge in terms of helping you visualise your map of interest, if you like, and then starting to say, okay, well, all of the people in pink we're going to approach in this way, because actually they're a particular contact leading to something else, and the people that are closest to the charity that know about us, we're going to be more about getting their time in the diary to help with certain events to catalyse what we're doing and getting in their diary early, particularly if they're a local business or influencer. So I was intended just to take a little pause just to help you grab that piece of paper or the workbook if you've got it, or a simple Jamboard if you've got Google behind the scenes, just to start thinking through who those different groups might be. So the detail obviously is for after this session, but just to take a moment just to say, okay, I understand the principle, who is the first layer, what's the next layer, and then how does this link back to some of the goals that I've started to identify that my organisation will achieve from the first topic that we mentioned. Again, we'll just take just a moment just to have a think and a process. Okay, I won't pause too long because otherwise webinars get incredibly boring. So just in terms of then, we've talked segmenting the audience in terms of, yes, that's a good start. I've alluded to in some of my talking around it, specifically what else can you do or take that step further with people? So what else do they have to offer beyond donation? So being specific about influence, connections and expertise, and what will motivate them to support your campaign. So thinking about the aspects of your work, the stories of your impact, what's going to appeal to the different audience segments, and what stories will inspire them to give. So a practical example of that might be one of those corporate partners you want to get involved, and it might be that with your work you have a particular interest in using the natural environment, say for better mental health or therapeutic services, and actually the corporate partner you identified is a corporate, say gardening service or something, and their interest or their values as an organization relate to the environment. So you'd want to be talking to them about the shared corporate values that might be a slight extension of some of your other impact, but you're making it then very specific to that corporate as to why they might want to get involved. And again, there might be a very different tone and prose if you're talking to people that have benefited from your charitable work or people that have simply helped fund or support it in the past. So it's just thinking through, okay, how would we articulate ourselves to those different groups? So a very simple layout of that, and some four questions down the left hand side of that slide, and then the different groups across the top, again in different post-it note colours. So you can hopefully imagine this as a group exercise you do together as a team to say, well, what do we want from individual donors that have given previously? Well, we want them to donate again. Who else is in our network? So the previous donations from, it might be from Big Give or Virgin Media Giving or whatever. Have they opted into the comms? Can you communicate with them as you want to? So a check on your GDPR and just your data permissions before you start the campaign. Start talking as a team about the motivation for getting involved. So not just a sense of altruism, but also the cause and the impact areas we've discussed, and maybe even sending a thank you card or something for their previous donation as a way of getting them back into a mailing list if they'd previously opted out, or different links on social media of how people can opt into different mail shots if that's appropriate. And so using email is one route, but also remember social media has different ways that you can create groups and lists of interest around your topic area, and so you might want to be building that now. So when you've got a particular cause or a particular story, you can link it to a group of people that you know will be interested in that particular tone or that particular piece of case study that you're using in the way that you're using it. And again, so for new people that have never donated, there might be a slightly different ask. It might be that actually the very simple way to reach them is through sponsorship posts or creating links from your social media to encourage new people to donate. And with events organisers or people that might be running events in your community, to do that, what's going to motivate them to run an event for you rather than somebody else contacting them to help them generate ideas, rather than you just asking them to run a quiz night or a fundraiser, but actually getting their ideas of how they could help you to achieve their goals, and getting some of those events going early, given that this is going to be a busy season for this type of work. So getting ahead and planning that out will do you the world of good. I hope that makes sense. I'm just going to take a little pause just for people to read all of the notes. Just to, yeah, that question's been answered. Lovely. Okay, so I always like to dwell a little bit on value propositions, and by this, what I mean is the third point really is around what solution are you offering to address a particular social need, and how do you talk about that impact structure? So in terms where, say, charities might have this wrong is to do just a broadcast message about a particular event that they're running, or a particular, what we do badly sometimes in our comms at FSI is just shout about particular events that happen at a particular time, but not necessarily what you're going to learn or why should you join them. So spending some time before you deliver a kind of call to action to think about how's that call going to be received by different people within that community? So the value proposition then is quite key, because your value and how you articulate that to the people that have benefited from your services will be one way of communicating to people. That'll be a lot more emotive. The stories will be powerful, and they'll be talking about the impact you've had on their lives in particular. That might be different if you're trying to get a corporate sponsor or another group of particularly like-minded people in your area involved in a particular campaign. So it might be that you want to layer that to get people referring people into your service, that they understand why your service exists in the first place, and also why that's good for them to advertise in their area. What benefit do they get out of it? Because they're not getting the funds, because your organisation's getting that. So what's the benefit of them getting involved rather than working with another charity? So speaking to some key contacts, maybe at local school or PTA or church clubs, parish councils, thinking of the individuals at Rotary Club or different fundraising networks that exist, to start putting your charity and the Big Give Christmas appeal on their radar quite early in terms of getting them involved. And then you've got the opportunity for them to articulate the value to you, to help you write your communications. And if they're more actively involved in helping you design and write the campaigns, those campaigns, in my opinion, will be more effective. So getting that as clear from the off, that's really in your job list to do in the next week or two, is once you start to contact people about the campaign and why you're doing it, is to really ask them, like, do you really understand the impact we're having and the solution we're offering to this problem, and trying to put that in their words, and testing those words and the different formats of them in different email types will be really useful. So this is the kind of hard graft bit behind the scenes, is to start templating different asks based on different people with that value proposition terminology in mind, because that's what's going to pull people in when there's lots of people asking for attention at the moment. Then I guess that's my top tip, so to speak. So within that, naturally, the personal stories are the most powerful bit at the moment. So if you've got permission to share them, great. If you have limited case studies, or if they're a bit old or they need refreshing based on what people have told you, then it's worth also going back to them now, because some beneficiaries might not want to be used. Obviously, there'll be some people that can be used but anonymously, but some people might want to do a vox pop or a brief video for Twitter or Facebook as part of your campaign, and having a bit of time to make sure that's designed and ready, and the kind of the story of that links to what your call for action is and goes back and resonates with your original goals, will be really useful. And also, when do you want to prompt the audience that donations are doubled? Because there's a usefulness to when you nudge or prompt people at particular times. Maybe it might sound a little callous, but after some stories have been released, you might want to schedule some tweets that are reminding people about the giving structure and what you want to do to encourage it. So the timing of those stories becomes important in your calendar of events for particular groups that you're wishing to influence. Okay, so within the context of webinar, I'm going to just take a couple of minutes, well, a minute or so, just to allow you just to have a little think about that, different elements of your proposition in terms of, okay, what's the need for our work? How do we articulate that? What's our particular solution, and how's that unique? How do we describe it as unique? And therefore, what's the difference we're making as an organization? And then if you want to share those in the chat function, we can then describe a few, and I can also offer a little feedback on them if you want to be so bold. So this should be one line or so to say, this is the issue we address, this is the why, this is the difference we make. There's a little nudge in the chat box from Sahil, so if you did want to type into a quick one, I'll give you an example of a value proposition that FSI uses. Is not perfect for the big give, but we say so previously, before we joined, we say we supported small charities to build their impact. We now say we support individuals to build their skills and knowledge within a small charity. So our pitch is more towards the individual learning journey now, and helping people build, a bit more precisely, to help people build impactful organisations. And if you don't feel like sharing, just simply write down some notes. And the key to any campaign or pitch is thinking of yourself as if you're in an elevator. How are you going to describe your organisation to someone that doesn't know you as a hook? So instead of talking about just the what you do, it's talking about why you do it. I think Catherine's been kind enough to share with everyone hers in terms of the I can't attempt to pronounce that, I don't think, but in terms of the extreme form of pregnancy sickness, so describing the condition, and then the solution in terms of the services they offer the sufferer and baby to survive the condition. So that's quite a nice example. I guess my interest then is to say how it's, instead of just describing the HG, instead of just describing that, actually go with the story of the parents and children first, and what the effect it has on them, just to draw people into the story might be useful. I think we've got another example in terms of child labour need. I think everybody can see these in the chat function, which is really useful. So people returning children to school and tackling poverty that forces people into work. So I guess my feedback on that, if I was to flip it around, what happens then to the children as a result of getting back in? So a bit more on the hopes and staying out of harm's way, because that's where the impact is. So it strikes me that's transformational on a young person's life. So maybe starting with the transformational bit as to why would help. And thank you for sharing the examples in real time as we go. Great, we've got some other examples appearing, so I'm just going to take a note just to read through a lot. So in terms of wild tiger health, that's a really nice way to describe that. I like the imagine a world without tigers. In particularly, you've described a bit more of the what you do in terms of we train local vets, etc. That's more in the what. I'm more interested in that last bit around the why bit. Why are those vets needed to be trained and put in certain locations? So maybe be a bit clearer in terms of the impact bit that we're having, and then my feedback won't be perfect because it's a little bit rushed, but I'm doing it in the moment. And in terms of then helping combat loneliness in older vulnerable people by recruiting volunteers to support isolated people, that sounds a little. I'm not trying to be rude or anything. I'm just trying to say it sounds a little generic. So I'd say, what do you mean by vulnerable people? But more importantly, what's the effect of supporting isolated people having on them? If they're out more mobile, are they healthier? Are they happier? Are they more connected? That draws me into the cause more than just recruiting volunteers to support. So I hope that helps. It's very well intended rather than anything else. And thank you again for the brave people that are sharing their value propositions. That's really useful, and hopefully gives others that aren't sharing just some examples of how you can reframe it. So the last one that came in is around supporting mental health and well-being to be the best carer they can be for their loved one. And that's probably more powerful than it sounds. So actually it's giving people some time out maybe from carers, or actually giving them the tools they need to self-sustain themselves better in a really tough situation. So again, just talking more about the richness that is behind better mental health and well-being, the specific effects you're having that then keeps that family unit connected and keeps that person well. And it might even be that you elaborate on that with different people, because the carers in that situation are playing a fundamental role in keeping people at the NHS for so many reasons as well. So there's lots of longer term impacts that has if that carer is well. So I just encourage you to unpack that a bit more emotively for campaigns like this. So hopefully that's all useful. If other feedback comes in, I'm quite happy to do it. I'm going to go back to the slide deck. I'm just going to check in with the Q&A. Aligning case for support with landing page. Yeah, I think the big giver on that. That's great. Yeah, I'll just say thank you to everyone that put comments in, and thank you for the thank yous, etc. But that's really great. In terms of just unpacking value proposition a bit more, I guess my feedback resonates with this, or it was intended to, in terms of this is, as I said, this is kind of elevator pitch stuff. So it's getting people's attention and being very conscious that you're not describing what you do, but you're getting their attention by captivating them as to why you do it. That's the critical bit. So it's not, you're not be careful not to say this is the service we provide, but actually you're saying this is the effect of the service we're providing on people, and this is our target group of people that impacts upon, because that's going, if you're interested in the effects or positive effects that X is having on young people, then that person will ask so what do you do, and then how can I help you do it? And so that the passion of that pitch, that emotion, the captivating bit will come through the stories of the individuals you're supporting. So being very conscious now to get those stories written and okayed by the people that affects, and then being very conscious that there'll be different people that resonates with. There'll be some that go, that's interesting, doesn't move me to do other stuff because my main passion is something else, and that's fine, but you've got on their radar. But those people then that have then come back and expressed an interest or liked a post or followed you, you can then do your next layer of communications to start to change from just somebody that's now freshly known about your work into somebody that might actively support your work, and then setting up the communications with them to allow, or you've got the templates in place, sorry, to then communicate with them further, but on a slightly different note to try and convert them into a supporter. And obviously at the end, remembering that this is a campaign. At the end of the day, it's time limited for a reason. There'll be different points where you want to nudge people in slightly different ways, but overall there's a call to action there to remind the audience of what you want them to do. Being very precise, how can they help support your work, and the different ways in which they can support your work other than just donating to your organisation financially. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an example of Little Village. I'm just going to go back a couple of slides just to remind you of what we're talking about in terms of the different elements of articulating a value proposition and the different ways that this resonates with people in different ways that then you might present it. I'll just hopefully click on here and a case study will magically appear. So hopefully you can see this okay. And my first point is this is their example from 2021. It's not necessarily to be copied.
Sorry, Stuart, we can't see the example.
Okay, let me do a new share.
There we go. Yep, you can see that now.
Okay, that's gone back to my slide deck. How annoying. Hang on 1 second. Always the fun of Zoom. Okay, that's really annoying because it's just disappeared from my pack. Just bear with me 1 second. No. Okay, for some reason my PDF doesn't want to show.
I can share the, if you just bear with me.
You've got the PDF, right?
Yep, I have the PDF, so I can share it.
Right, and in the meantime, I'll scurry away and try and reopen things.
And just bear with me. Okay.
I wish I had some fancy music, interlude music, other than just humor to keep me going.
I hope
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. So we can all see that. So what was nice about this example for me is instantly the first thing that they started to create was imagery around what they did. So if you'd be kind enough just to scroll up a little bit, they had kind of a stamp look to their appeal in terms of introducing what it was. So they spent some time just saying, we're doing an appeal. Obviously, you don't know yet what Little Village is doing, but if you scroll up there, Sahil, you know that you start to understand that their targets were quite bold, if you like. They can talk about what they do as an organisation in terms of supporting families across London that are going through tough times. So they basically create a bank resource for people to collect goods that people have donated for young people in their family. This example will be shared, so we can go through the text another time. If you keep going down to the hill, that would be great. Because you can check in, we'll share this as an example with you all. What I wanted to draw the attention to is the comms aspect in this bit here, which was their use of imagery. So they were very specific in terms, well, I think quite canny in terms of getting a graphic designer to create some really nice user-friendly images, just to say at different points, how are we going to articulate what we need as an organisation? So you can imagine these reinterpreted for talking about value propositions, or this is the reason this exists. But these little prompts I thought were really a clever way at a time when people are recognising Christmas stamps, etc., that then people could resonate with the appeal and drop these in different ways in terms of social media or events that they were doing. And if you continue to scroll down, they've then been able to talk about the different stages of their appeal in a particular way and what their goal was in terms of creating traction in terms of email campaigns and getting more people involved at different layers of their campaign. Again, we don't need to go into the detail too much, but I thought this was a particularly savvy way of communicating a message with people, which was something which stood out from just a lot of text, but that use of imagery with quite a powerful logo, for me, created traction into interest, and then their passionate story came across really clearly in what their campaign was. So, and again, it's just an example. It's not copy it word for word. That won't do you any good, because this is very much their words, their actions, etc. But I just wanted you to see the imagery that they'd created and what they were doing. So you can stop sharing now. Say hello. That's great. Thank you. Thanks for stepping in while I was floundering. That's also very useful. So note to self, get the next case study up in advance. Okay, great. So just going back to the slide deck. So just bear with me 1 second. Okay, so that example prompted some thoughts around communication. Now, they're not a rich, wealthy national charity. They're very local to South London, and they have particular residents in their communities that donate. A lot their mix of, they're based in some really poor areas, but they've got reach in, as London sadly is very inequality, so they've got some very rich networks as well as some very poor pockets that they serve. So they are able to galvanize the community of donations to create these banks of resources for young people. That I thought their particular use of the graphic imagery really resonated with me, so it made things stand out. It made me want to click and look at their campaign last year. There might be different ways that you're thinking through what you might use. So in terms of creating promotional channels, yes, they were really good at graphic design, but they dropped that in a certain way using their website, direct mail, email, in a particular way to use that imagery, and then make that kind of bounce a little bit more on social media in terms of what's going on. So you know that the campaign, it looks consistent, there's an energy behind it and a clear message. And then they've chosen particular ways that they'll communicate that with people. And their imagery alone goes to point 2 in terms of their driving people to a particular Christmas challenge campaign. So there was a separate ask, which was specifically related to the Christmas challenge, which gave some focus to what they were campaigning for, which wasn't just donate lots more stuff to us, but there was a particular ask that was separate to their core day-to-day work, which is kind of part of the reason why you'd want to do a campaign in the first place, because the money is lovely, but the reach, the networks, the support, what it creates afterwards is as lovely. And so that ability to consider their audience and tailor messages and then have engaging content, including those images that I shared in a particular style, were particularly useful to their campaigns. So just giving some thought, going back to your spider map of different audience members of, well, which channel or what's going to appeal to our supporters. So because it might be on reflection, well, actually a fancy graphic design in the shape of a stamp, actually that's not really going to work with my group of people, but what will work is a physical event or a get together, which asks people then to go out and provide maybe a more ambassadorial role. And that people to people storytelling approach is what you're going to base your work on, rather than a graphic design and reach campaign in a different way. Or it might be that there's different networks that resonate with your cause area that you want to identify particular influencers or promoters within, and being very conscious of them, giving them the resource packs they need to promote your work on your behalf. So that's particularly relevant when if you're quite a small organization and don't have lots of internal resource, you're going to be relying on volunteers then to put this message out. So being very conscious of the messaging that you give to them and the consistency it has, but also the fact that it really should be written by them as well, so they can kind of live and breathe the message in the same way that you do. Okay, so there's a couple of prompts here about the channels that you might use. I'd assume people are kind of aware of different types of social media that can be used in different ways. I guess my tip, it's not to learn all social media or be good at all social media. There's a few examples there that we've given. So if your cause has particular imagery that you want to promote, or there's a particular fundraising campaign, maybe for a community garden or some specific stuff where you've got a vision of the future, i.e. help us create this, then Instagram's a really nice platform to share pictures and the aspiration of, if you're trying to gather groups together, like-minded groups to share content, and Facebook is obviously a one to use. And certainly I tend to use Twitter for if I'm broadcasting space on advertising stuff, but it's a lot more of a broadcast medium these days in terms of this is happening. So I think it's part of a suite of that linked with Facebook and Instagram can work for most small charities in a really cost efficient way. If you're more ambitious or you want certain kind of more corporate volunteers or people that have corporate contacts, and LinkedIn is a good way to share or update profiles, particularly blogs written about a campaign, preferably by somebody not in your immediate charity, but somebody else that says, I'm volunteering for X, would be a really nice use of LinkedIn, if then with a clear ask back to website and whatever. And TikTok, if you've got a strong video or a catchy vox pop or something that you want to share. But again, just be very aware of your storytelling and the authenticity of your story. It might be that actually just a very simple somebody speaking to camera, a 30-second shot of somebody that's benefited from your work embedded on Twitter and Facebook is more than enough. So you don't need to think of creating a short montage via TikTok or whatever, or who's going to reach that. But it might be something then that you consider next year. So I'm just conscious some chat has come up. See what's being picked up. So I'm just trying to open that up if there's any questions there. So yes, certainly we'll be sharing the case studies. There'll be Q&A in, well, maybe about 10-15 minutes time. And in terms of directing people to campaign page, what I would be doing now is getting people's interest and mapping where they might be providing or their offer of providing services for you. So start to say to people, we're thinking of doing this campaign, or we've got this campaign going, how might you be interested? And then pacing those particular donations out as part of the comms plan, but firstly building your database of contacts in particular orders. The other part of doing it, and there's a case study coming up in terms of well-known supporters or particular influencers or people embedded in your community in a particular way, if you're not lucky enough to have a high-profile patron or whatever, and recognizing that they've got a slightly different role to play in terms of their ability to reach people and using them at particular time points, particularly if double donations is part of it, and timing their interactions and things. So having a wall planner to hand and mapping out these different activities and when people might get involved will do you the world of good as well, rather than being reactive in the moment, but essentially executing a plan. Most posts on Twitter can be scheduled in advance, so part of the timing of different prompts or different releases of videos can be done without you needing to be there in real time, but they can be scheduled way in advance and then linked to different blog posts or different content from different places. So it looks like there's a concerted effort at particular times, and then dropping in those well-known supporter or influencer stories at the side, and then just to repeat the fact around those kind of impact stories in terms of where people have had a very specific experience and then what's changed in their life as a result of your work, and getting those short videos, vox pops created now and saved now, ready for use, but putting some thought into then supporting the people of what they're going to say. So you're going back to the value proposition conversation, that's what they would be saying on it. So not just their story, but then they are the why reason of the charities. So just making sure that links to the overall campaign cause would be very useful. Although I guess this is, if you're short on staff, this might be in the, I'd love to do more personalization, but that does create time. But if you do have that resource, or you are thinking about how to do it, then just treat this as a useful prompt to say, actually, the personal approach really makes people feel valued. So linking, people that are best placed in your charity to make a particular approach to someone, because somebody might want a note from trust chair or CEO or somebody senior. It might be that the supporters connected with a volunteer or something in a particular way, so you'd want the volunteer to give them a chat. So just thinking through why that supporter's motivated to work with you in a certain way, and then to personalize your approach to them as much as possible. So being very conscious of personalizing emails or comms. I've seen campaigns that have been galvanized by people writing personal postcards and thanks beforehand, that link to the fact that a campaign is coming, but just as a personal thank you for work done, just to start re-engaging or engaging with people, and then naturally reminding them at different timings that donations are doubled in a particular way if they're actively doing stuff or sharing stories about different ways that people can get involved to help you double the donations. And I think, as I've reiterated all throughout, getting those conversations in early, i.e. now and in the next week, will do you the world of good in terms of getting the people interested and starting to populate those databases for you in terms of how people are interested, and what you would be pitching to them, so to speak. Let me just stop the share. I'm just going to go to another example, but I've got hopefully I've got my PDF ready. He says boldly. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to double check. Sahil, or can you see that?
Yeah, we can see that.
Great. It's what I should have done in the first place, Sahil. But anyway, so this is the Longfield Community Hospice, which some of you may have heard about. They had quite a high-profile campaign. I just wanted to talk their example through with a slightly different angle than Little Village. This wasn't necessarily that this is an exemplar of comms practice. You can see that their campaign was generated around giving more families the opportunity to spend precious time together at home before a loved one dies. Their campaign was structured there, and again, we'll share this example with you. I thought the aims of the campaign were pretty clear. If I was giving feedback to them, if I was being so, I'd say they need to be a bit more specific in terms of what amount they're looking to raise, and in terms of leveraging and raising the profile. Is there any goals for people extending their reach? So just being a little bit more specific about their example, but certainly, and the last point is part of the reason why I wanted to mention them. So just in terms of the background, they've got some good data then on who pledged and what they pledged, etc. And I'll spare you the detail of what they achieved and how they achieved it and when. I'll just skip on if you don't mind. So one of their big ones is using the leverage of a high-profile supporter to then galvanize new donations. So one of their goals was creating new people, which they achieved to some degree. And then the power of the influencer is partly why I wanted just to share this story of how they used the story of Richard E. Grant and Richard's wife that had benefited from care from the hospice, and they helped support him to essentially create the story behind them and to get involved in the campaign. And then there's some examples there of how they constructed some of that with obviously Richard and his daughter. Obviously they've got him talking to camera, so they were fortunate enough that he was generous to do that. Not everyone will, so just to bear that in mind. And then there's the different nudges and ways to communicate with them for people that don't necessarily recognize this is content that's been generated on Twitter, with then various links back to the website Big Give, the hospice itself, just linking in the networks of people. Clearly he's got a large network of influence that's gone far and wide as the campaign went on, and he's been quite open on social media about his experience. So this is just a nice way to root that example in. And then in terms of then just being really open about what that campaign then is looking to achieve. So it's not just using a celebrity endorsement for X, Y, or Z, but just being very specific about what that is. And I guess the part of the lessons there were around, sorry, excuse me, I just skipped a bit fast there. Around digital content planning, as you can expect, then they needed to construct that narrative in a particular way in terms of creating kind of teasers about the story, the different ways they constructed the value proposition around the care and the difference it made to them as a family. So the story was certainly engaging and compelling, regardless of whether there was a celebrity endorsement or not. And then wider footage of hospice carers being interviewed, what it means to them to be part of the care process, and then supporting that donation process as the campaign went on. So the digital media side of this really underpinned the use of digital media, particularly social media, really underpinned the success of their campaign, and they've used that kind of wisely for obvious reasons around with permissions around what Richard and his family went through. And then there's some clear asks then around the ways that people can give, and then they've embedded video. So he hasn't always just fronted some of the campaign stuff themselves, they've embedded it, and they get then the traction and the followers around what they create and how to then donate. So you can see them sharing the links in terms of donated campaigns, and then they've been specific then around what they've achieved in terms of the engagements, the likes and stuff on social media, and what that did see that was really successful, particularly Facebook there is unpicked, and then the reach on particular posts then can be tracked in terms of what was done. So there's plenty of things then to build in, and then to create different email marketing just to make sure they've collected the data from their donors to say, well, thank you to the people that then have responded to that particular campaign. So they've used particular imagery in quite powerful ways, but also they've had the story that not everyone will, but just to recognize then that has an impact on what, like their reach and their impact. Then naturally there's been various press coverage that they've captured around that. So all of the press releases, the tweets, the engagement with them in the first place, that's a lot of the legwork was done behind the scenes to create this as a successful campaign. So the templates that were needed to create the content to raising their awareness, but all the background stuff comes from the volunteers. So it might be, I mean, the learning there kind of tells the story in better words than I can probably mention. But in terms of if involving others to help, keeping it simple, breaking it down to specific tasks, i.e. photography, videography, I guess was my big takeaway from this. They did it in a really authentic way. It wasn't overdone. It wasn't too professional. It was simply volunteers sharing value proposition and talking clearly about the offer, and then getting people behind a specific campaign. And there's just some different learning there as well that we can share. I just don't want to talk to each individual post, but you'll see some of the points there around different staff members at different levels in the organisation offering different work to secure pledges from different types of people. Naturally, given his reach and his profile, there'll be different people approaching the organisation as well. So just being prepared to manage those different audiences in a particular way, and naturally being sensitive to what that campaign was. So being very careful about the wording used at a tough point in their lives. So let's go back to the main deck. Okay, so we're just coming to the end of the main presentation, and we'll open it up for Q&A on the chat. I guess just to prompt for ideas, it might be that yes, you've got an influencer, they might become an ambassador or a patron. There might be different ways to get them involved behind a campaign. There might be different PR that you want to create from that. So we've got some training and some content to support that in due course. And then there might be different events. I've skipped over using people within your networks to hold events on your behalf, but just as a nudge to do it, you might have people holding interest events, i.e., it might be simple as a quiz or something at the church where people are raising the profile of what is coming with the Christmas campaign that you're running locally, and then thinking about those local groups that might organise something for you and giving them a pack or a volunteer to support them in creating that event on your guidelines might be really, really useful. And I guess just in terms of wrap up and final tips, and it's fairly self-explanatory, just in terms of what have you tested before, what are you currently using that's effective in your fundraising, what's the style or tone that resonates with people. Though both of those examples had very different tones to them in terms of what they were doing and what they looked like. And I guess within this is an opportunity to also just test some ideas and see what works, particularly with a slightly new campaign or a challenge, opportunity to test some new ways of getting people involved or offering a chance to support a particular new type of activity. And then in terms of just time spent and looking at it, if you can then, if you haven't got this data already, this is a useful opportunity to start mapping out conversions between emails sent with particular asks or tweets sent, and then people making donations. The early signs of the campaign will give you some clues of then what works and what doesn't work. So I guess be prepared to change tact or tone a little if one tweet resonates more than another. Then having that in your plan of different styles to adopt might be a useful nudge. So you might think that one message actually was really good, it just doesn't quite land, but actually talked through the voice of somebody else, or the same words but through a different slightly different tone. Then just testing different ways is a really nice way to do it. So I think I'm in the bits of handing back to Sahil for the narrative bit, and then opening up the Q&A. So there's some nudges there in terms of when things are starting, a place where you can follow up with further questions. And if you enjoyed me talking at you for the last hour and a quarter of your life, then you can sign up to other webinars where you'll see my name attached to them. Thankfully, there's some others that are sharing their expertise and dulcet tones with anyway. So if you are tuning out now, if you haven't got a question or whatever, thank you for listening and taking part.
Thank you, Stuart. That was really excellent and really informative. So really, really great presentation there, and I hope people have any questions, please do ask them. I think we can start. We've had a couple of questions already. So this one's from Kat, and she says, we have two main aims, environmental, I think they're environmental charities. So we have two main aims, environmental in reducing slash and burn deforestation, and social in supporting women farmers. How do you integrate two aims into the messaging she's referring to? Because it's kind of difficult.
Gosh, I'm not sure you need to integrate two aims. You just need to be conscious that the impact of each area will resonate with different people in different ways. So your value proposition will adapt based on the people you're trying to reach. So women's rights that are inherent to supporting the farmers is a totally different value proposition and impact around empowerment than reducing slash and burn, which ultimately will have a carbon reduction aim and a different purpose. So it's as an organisation being conscious, and some people in your interest area will resonate with the one impact story much more than another. So testing the messages with those people to say, if people are interested in carbon reduction, stick to the slash and burn messaging with them, because that's going to make them donate. You don't need to communicate the other stuff with them, just be really specific and clear.
Great. We had one question from Laura. So would you recommend creating a campaign page on their own website with case studies, videos, etc., and then link it to the Big Give Christmas Challenge page so we can direct people to the campaign page on our website, or would that overcomplicate things?
If you've got the resource, I'm a big believer in phasing comms, so having just one overview, this is the campaign we're running for the Big Give, and then having the resources on the Big Give page, but then layering in as you go different formats with using different media and different ways of telling the story to prompt people in different ways. So it's the planning is the key. Going back to the first point made there is if you've got the time to set something up good and the hosting page, the main thrust here is all the tools for the campaign, so planning them out first and using the resources on the Big Give.
Great. We've had a couple of questions around this. Is how far in advance would you recommend trailing the campaign in our comms before the launch date? So yeah, do you have any specific advice?
I would do some not the public comms, but get your invite list sorted, get your database, if it is in any kind of shape, but get it into good shape so you can dissect your audience. That's the really hard graft that you have to do right now for this stuff to work as well as you'd want it to, is what I would say. Doing lots of generic mail shots in a certain time frame, it's really hard for people. There's going to be a lot of Big Give campaigns hitting people. And so I would say in teasing it through, do the soft calls, the personal emails, the phone calls now to get people interested in what you're doing without any public profile per se, but just setting things up so you're ready. But you've also spent some time as a team giving some thought to the specific asks you've got of those people. So when you launch then the main campaign, the different people are ready with their component parts, whether that's share a story or this is why I got involved or whatever, or to actually just start putting donations in the pot to get things going. People are really clear then about what their role is.
Absolutely. I think, generally we advise maybe sort of properly announcing it a week before the campaign. You don't want people to announce it a month before and then they'll just forget about it. So you don't want to do it too early. Beth, do you have any questions?
Yeah, sure. So someone has asked how many times could or should we contact donors with emails, obviously keeping in mind that there are lots of messages going out. Is there a standard amount people should be emailing?
That's really a judgment call for the organisation. I don't have a set. I don't know if you do, so I don't have a set way. I mean, in terms of my members, if you like, communicating with them, we don't have it's not donor profiles. It's not a perfect example. That's a monthly thing. If we're advertising training, that'll be a weekly promotion to them. The key to the first comms, if it's a new donor, is or making sure that you can communicate with them, getting your GDPR in place, but also the why question, making sure they really understand the purpose of it, because then the reminders won't be to look at us broadcast style. It's much more tailored to why your story and telling the story. And there's a joy of contacting donors and not asking for money. So I guess one thing I would bear in mind is actually telling your story and just putting that on the donor it can be as good as saying give us a tenner.
So, and I think it depends on what your messaging is. Like if you keep sending the same thing over and over again, that's not going to work. If you have something new to say, even during the campaign, is if you want to send a couple of emails, like make sure they are updates about your campaign. So like at the halfway stage, we raised this amount, can you help us, or can you share the campaign with your network? So like changing that messaging, so making sure it's not the same all the time. We did have an interesting question from Veronica, I can see in the chat, is we have a high profile patron, but their profile comes from the world of politics. So in short, is using a politician good or bad idea to gain traction on social media? I think that could be very contentious.
I'm naturally intrigued of who the politician is, I mean, it partly depends on their I would say it partly depends on their profile within the public sphere and where the party sits. You'll know instinctively the charity whether they're good for them, but there must be a reason why they're involved with you as a patron, and their contact book will be phenomenal. So you don't need to explicitly use them and say this person supporting us, giving us 500 quid. You want their contacts. You want them to be sending the personal reaches, the asks, the behind the scenes emails, doing what they do best as a politician, I'm sure, which is getting people on side. Hustling from within, so to speak, is that's a really good example of that map, and then how you use your network map to say, actually, there's somebody here, yes, we could use them in public profile, but actually it's going to be much better for us to galvanize interest through their networks and people that might organize events at House of Parliament on our behalf that doesn't have the political thing, but they've got the ability to have an event there because there's somebody there that will give them the invite or the backing, or they'll get one of their friends to give a fundraiser a free venue for a quiz or something. So it's just thinking through how you might use them in different ways if you don't want to be too overt about it.
Right. I think this next question is actually one for Beth. Is there a big give video to share again this year? So I think this
yes, we are well underway with planning all of our Christmas Challenge marketing plans. So there is going to be a video, but we'll notify all of you of when it is going to be available.
Great. Just question. So this is a good question. We're a small team. Do you recommend focusing on only 2 or 3 promotional channels?
If we're talking staff team, then yes, certainly. I mean, if you've got wider volunteers that you could ask for help, that might go through. I mean, to be honest, I mean, we can't, as an organisation, we've got 7 staff formally, 6 plus me, and we can't handle more than 3 social media channels. It's beyond us, and to be honest with you, really we only use Facebook and Twitter that well, and the other, Instagram and LinkedIn, is a bit amateur hour on our side. So we're in the, it suits our purpose, but it's not a great way to be, but it is what it is for us at the moment. So it's bearing in that mind of when you're planning and looking at your SMART goals, just being realistic.
Beth, as our social media sort of manager, do you have any further advice here?
Not particularly. I think it's, if possible, if you could get a scheduling tool, that could help you a lot. I know it's helped me, being a kind of team of 1 to 2 at Big Give. So Canva actually has a free scheduling tool if you're particularly using Canva to design all of your social media pictures and stuff, but I know there's also some paid social media scheduling tools that you could use. So potentially, if you have the budget, you could invest in that just for the campaign to help you schedule all of your comms during the week, and that'll just help take some of the load off of your work as well.
I should do a quick plug. I don't know if time allows, but I'm conscious that we have it as an organisation with Google Ads. So some organisations have been given Google AdWords as a value piece, and they're not always sure what to do with them. So monetizing, as crass, as geeky as it sounds, but monetizing hashtags is the business of Google Ads. And so if you do have Google Ads, it's worth you speaking to your comms person or someone about certain hashtags being promoted that relate to your charity name campaign and the Big Give in particular ways, because that will really help boost interest in quite a busy space if you are lucky enough to have it behind the scenes. If you aren't lucky enough to have it, or you've never heard of it, then certainly get Googling, because it's worth applying for it, because a lot of charities will be eligible for up to 10 grand's worth of Google Ads, which can make all the difference, particularly when you're doing a structured campaign like this. It can really be a differentiator, and it might be one for next year if the thought come a bit quick or whatever. Then so don't freak out or try and build in AdWords knowledge, because it does take planning, as all these things do. You can't just throw it in there. But I just wanted to mention it if you do have it, because a lot of charities are underusing them or not using them because they don't understand them at the moment.
That's a great point. Yeah, we do use Google Ad Grants as well. So yeah, if you can, we recommend it. Is it pushing it? We want to engage with new donors, but are also worried about not being able to reach out to our existing supporters. Is there a way to balance it? How should we balance it?
My approach would be construct the pitches differently. Your current donors, they're gold. So give them thanks, support, love, look after them, send them the personal emails or a postcard or just something just to acknowledge that they're there. For new ones, the first thing is if they're unknown to you, but they're a target donor or they're just somebody in the community you just want to donate, just remember that it's getting heard. That's the first thing. So getting your name out there, using the hashtags, getting promoted. The referral, for me, where I see charities do most well is that recommend a friend. So getting a donor to recommend somebody in is a really powerful thing. So can you suggest someone in your network to do a job for us or something for us? Is quite a nice ask to get new donors in without explicitly asking for money. I always like to think that sometimes you get more money by not asking for money. That sounds a bit cryptic, but that kind of galvanizing someone to say, actually, yes, you gave us some money, but you also gave us some time to organize the event. Could you recommend a friend to help organize an event at blah? It's just a nice way to get new donors in without saying, give us 20 quid.
And I guess it also depends on your aims for the campaign. We're talking about SMART goals, etc. It's like if one of the aims of your campaign is to get new donors, obviously heavily focus on that. But if it's one of the lower priorities, then obviously I think there's less work to do there compared to what you want to focus on.
Yeah.
Beth, is there anything else that you can see?
I'm scanning through the chat. I think we're there. Quite most people are, or there's a few people signing off and a few people still in awe of the workshops, worksheets, sorry, which my colleague created for me. So I was very lucky that I had a brain behind that made me look good. So props to Remy if she's around. Well, I think that's it. So I think our next training is Friday,
12 p.m. So yeah, if you haven't signed up, please do sign up. As we mentioned, we will be putting the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel, linking it in the webinars resources. We'll also be sharing the slides and all of the case studies, so you can all find that in the webinar resources section if you want to rewatch and go through all of this again. I want to thank Stuart for joining us today, for giving us a great presentation, and for putting together all of the case studies and the worksheet from me. So thank you, Stuart. And I want to thank all the attendees for joining us today. It's really been great to have you on the call and sharing your experiences and thoughts and questions with us. So it's been really interactive.
And I wish you all luck in it. And if you want to tweet at the FSI, then do so, find us, and then we can share campaigns. We've got a substantial list. We can't necessarily do everything for everyone we want to, but Big Give is quite close to our heart, so we try to promote and cross promote. So use our social media to amplify your voice. And I'll say to my organization, that's on me. I actually have the account. I have the account on my phone, so I can promote your work. So just literally, that's how you influence new people, I hope. And we've got 15,000 followers. So hey, if a few of them give you a few quid, then I'm doing my bit. So yeah.
That's amazing.
And I think there's a request for a link to be sent round. I assume, Bethany, you're on it.
Oh, yes. The other webinar. So they are in the resource section in the Christmas Challenge dashboard, all of the links for the future webinars. But if you can't find them, just email us at hello@thebiggive.org.uk and we can put you in the right direction.
Lovely. And no pressure. It's called Fundraising in Tough Economic Times. So it might be the poison chalice session, but we'll certainly share some experiences. And as a CEO fundraising in tough economic times, I'll share some very personal lessons of how we construct ourselves. But all right. Well, thanks again, and thanks for hosting, Sahil and Bethany. It's been nice working with you.
Likewise. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
All right. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.